structure that empowers and supports grassroots involvement at the individual riding level within regional associations. So provincially, we are going to move to one regional association for the province, and it will have an executive board of a CEO. It will have 7 what would we call them, kind of CEO level position. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to back this up. That's nationally. We're going to have 7 CEO positions, one for the Atlantic provinces, one for Quebec, 2 for Ontario, 1 for Saskatchewan, 1 for Alberta, and 1 for British Columbia. We're still organizing in Manitoba. Northwest Territories will probably be supported by the Alberta Regional Association, and Yukon and Nunavut will be supported by the BC Regional Association. So that brings me to provincial. Provincially, we're going to have 1 CEO. We're going to have 5 district coordinators, and our ridings are going to be divided up into 5 regional zones. And I've got a map of that, which I'd be happy to share with people if you want to talk about it afterwards, but I won't belabor that point now. But anyway, each of those riding groups will have a district coordinator, of which Bev is the interim one for this area here, Central Alberta. We're going to have riding directors for every riding, so that's 37 of those. They will probably default to, in the interim, being the candidates of record for those ridings, but we'd certainly like to get to a place where our base grows to the point where we have a number of potential directors from each riding, and also, we get to the point where our base is big enough that we can hold nomination contests and elect a candidate out of our ridings. And then of course, the board will also have a chief financial officer, and also in the interim, that's Jonathan there at the back. And we're going to have a candidate coordinator to coordinate the education and development and support of candidates and potentially interested candidates leading up to elections and through the elections to support their campaigns. And being totally honest, nationally, we had some problems with some of the campaigns in the last election as far as their adherence to the technicalities of Elections Canada's rules and regulations and some of their financial reporting. So we've got people sort of smoothing out those problems right now, but we want to avoid that in the future. So also on an interim basis, that candidate coordinator, it looks like it's going to fall to me. So all that aside, not really aside, but all of that is going to be solidified at, we hope, an AGM sometime in the spring. And the party is trying to coordinate nationally to have all of our regional associations AGM in around the same week in the spring, whether that's March, April, May-ish, we're hoping. So if you're a party member, please stay tuned to your emails for that information. And also, if you're a party member or are interested in being a party member, please come and see us. There's lots of work to be done in the individual ridings, as I alluded to develop riding associations within the regional association. so we can, elect our directors instead of, it falling to guys like me who were drafted. So please see us. We have need for workers, even organizing a kitchen party or a small group in a community hall or a barn or whatever, and one of our existing directors or candidates of record would be happy to come and talk to people and preach this gospel of the PPC. So thanks very much. I'm not going to belabor this with questions right now, but please see us after if you have any questions.
Thanks, Larry. So our guest speaker is on his way. So we do have some time to fill. We have how many online waiting?
We have 150 people.
150. So we don't want to disappoint them. So I'm going to sing. No. Instead of singing, I am a firm believer in our country. We have lots of disappointment in our country at this time with what is going on, but I believe that the Lord gave us this land, and we are just travelers through, but we need to do what is good and right, be responsible, respectful, fair, just, and instead of singing "O Canada," I often go to the fourth verse. I don't know if many of you know, but I think there's about 7 verses in "O Canada." I got a nod, somebody knows the fourth verse. And I just want to read it this morning to remind us of the humility, and along with humility is the responsibility of working out what our part is. Ruler supreme, who hear our humble prayer, hold our dominion within thy loving care. Help us to find, O God, in thee, a lasting rich reward, as waiting for the better day. And believers, it's coming. What we might have to go through to get to that better day may shake us, may disappoint us, but it will grow us, mature us, if we choose. We all have that wonderful free will. We everly stand on guard. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. So that is a beautiful, humble prayer and a reminder that we are but traveling through, and we all have a rank. There's no one higher, less. We all have a part, and that's what the People's Party of Canada is all about. Yes, of course, we have a leader, Maxime Bernier, who we have entrusted to speak and for the people of Canada, and he did a great job, especially during COVID. He was the only leader federally who chose to stand on guard for us. And I respect him for that. And he's going to have a lot more challenges ahead, I know. So, but anyway, at this time, I'm just going to call Kyla Courts. She is also a candidate of record for Red Deer. And she is going to just give you a little bit of understanding of Jim, the author. So Kyla, if you'd like to come, and she's going to introduce him, even though he isn't here quite yet. But she read his book, and so she's just going to maybe give you some highlights, and I'll just pass it over to you, Kyla.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see everyone. I've not been spending much time in public lately, as I had this little baby a few months ago, so I appreciate your grace if my words are not what they maybe once were. Who has had a chance to read Jim's book or is familiar with the book, his Scarlet Lesson? Nobody? No. Okay. So I read this book and I found it very interesting. And what really stood out to me is that Jim, through his words, he seems to be the type of teacher that I would have really appreciated having when I was a bit younger. And he was one that I luckily did get to enjoy because I went to school quite a few years ago. And it made me quite distraught that kids these days can't have a teacher who's able to take, a little bit of an edge when it comes to telling you the truth or drawing from current events in their lesson plan, because I think that's really important. So that's what I took away mostly from the beginning of his book. He'd gotten in trouble a few times before he had finally gotten the final nail in the coffin with the residential school 215 Kamloops situation. Hey, sweetheart. It's okay. So I do look forward to hearing from him. He has quite a background in his own education, and one thing I found quite interesting was that he actually studied at the University of Alberta under Mark Carney's dad. So he learned about residential schools and Canadian history from our current Prime Minister's father, which was really an interesting point, and I hope he maybe touches base on that a little bit more. So I look forward to what he has to say. I know that there's a lot happening in BC right now, and I've been listening to it and wondering how that will impact the rest of us here in Canada. It also is a bit of a poignant time with what we've witnessed in Alberta during this teachers' strike and the current climate and the recall petitions and whatnot that have been started against the UCP for their use of the notwithstanding clause. And I see a lot of familiar faces here from people who, are exploring all sorts of opportunities to make sure that at least Alberta remains sovereign if the rest of Canada decides to go down the path that it's going. So I find I'm waiting with bated breath to see how these recall petitions wind out and what happens as a result of this strike and the back to work route that our UCP government has chosen. So it's an interesting time, and I'm very grateful for voices like Jim's and people like a lot of the people here in this room who are doing the good work to make sure that we have options and we have a future here in our home, whether it be Alberta or a united Canada, whichever route. It's important to have people who are willing to stand up for that. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they'd like maybe to compile as something we make sure that Jim talks about? No? No? Bev, do we have a bit of an update? Yay! I'm always the one who gets to go on to fill the time between the guest and who we actually want to hear from. So it's something I've done before, but it's a little bit harder after the brain changes that come with having a small baby. So I know a lot of you might know about that too. But here is the gentleman of the morning. We have Jim McMurtry. Jim, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to say some things that I think will interest you. I'm going to probably say some things that you already know, and it's wonderful to have a young person here. So just a couple of questions. I say I'm being recorded here. Am I standing in the right place? And if there's anything I'm to do, am I too loud, too anything? So if you want me to do something different, please let me know. So first of all, thank you for being here. I never imagined, it was almost 5 years ago now, when I was walked out in front of my students, that anything good was going to come from that. And at the same time, my wife was dealing with stage 4 cancer, incurable cancer. So all of a sudden, we found, both of us, that we were out of work, and then I was a big disgrace, including to my wife. Wasn't, it took her a little bit of time for her to accept that, I didn't do anything wrong, because it was just hard for us financially. And I, so, and again, I just hope and certainly believe people do appreciate that it's not easy losing your job. So here I am, years later, and there's a really nice man in the back, Chris Wyman, who said, "Jim, there are people in Alberta that would like to hear from you." It's just sort of surreal for me that people would actually want to listen to me, because again, I was really crushed. And they walked me out in front of my students once before, so twice in front of my students, so it would suggest that, I was some sort of criminal or whatever. And so that begins my story, and there's certain pieces to it that you're going to see recur. There are a lot of literary allusions, because I was an English teacher for a long time, and that's particularly important because I love books, and I want to tell you what they're doing to good books in school. And I also want to, make reference to some exciting things that are happening in British Columbia. And so I know I'm in Alberta, but my story is, it's more acute really, and the problems I think are worse in British Columbia. And I know Alberta, by the way. I lived in Edmonton for 2 years, and one of my children lived here for a number of years, and so I've spent a lot of time here. I just love Alberta physically, and it was so wonderful driving here, except for the fact that there was a truck on fire, and I was stopped for 2 hours yesterday, and I was an hour late for the first speaking engagement of my life. And so I know we came just at the last minute here, but I'm on time, so I'm feeling so relieved. So I've got, if any time you think that there's something really important to say, do say it. I will take some questions toward the end. I do understand, again, this is being watched by other people as well, which is, again, tremendous, wonderful honor for me. I brought books to sell. I only have 5, and if you don't buy them, that's okay, because I only have 5 left. And I think, but I also have little leaflets can show you if you are interested in order my book on Amazon. Again, it's all part of the fact that I think my story actually is becoming important. And I don't think there's anything important about me. I was just a guy who was trying to stay in the teaching profession and dodging all the fastballs that are just thrown at your head all day long. Because any kid at any time in that classroom can snitch on you, to a parent, to an administrator, to a colleague. I mean, at any time you can, be carried away. And for me to be removed the second time was even worse than the first time, which I'm not going to go into it, for saying something that is true. And just quickly about residential schools. I studied residential schools. That's one of the few things I know about. And when they're saying in Kamloops, where we were a few days ago with Alice Brody, who heads up this new party that's going to transform Canada called 1BC, playing on the idea that we're all Canadian, we all should have rights that are no more, no less than other Canadians. And Francis Whittleson, who's this incredibly determined professor, and they've come into this, and they're inviting me to events and made me a 1BC candidate and doing all these things for me because of what I did starting, again, almost 5 years ago in fighting the original sin. So, as you know, in a biblical sense, there's this idea that there is original sin. And I don't want to talk about, Adam and Eve and the apple and all that sort of stuff. I just want to, the conception here is that Canada was born in sin. And the sin is that we did not treat people who don't look like we look like, that we treated them badly. So I'm looking here and I'm seeing people with the same power that I have, probably the same ancestry, and you're all the enemy. And if you have children in schools, particularly where I was teaching, the kids would realize very quickly that you're the enemy. So when I was on the highway yesterday, trying to talk to Chris with his very poor reception, saying to him, the fire is still going on, and there's no fire truck, and I'm so sorry. There was a man walking up and down, people out of their vehicles just walking up and down, and I met a guy, and we started talking, and then he had a boy with him, and the boy's name was Garrett, and I said to, ask him questions, what are you doing? Oh, I'm a high school student, and what do you want to do after that? And he said, well, I'd like to get a job, but there are no jobs because I'm a white guy. I mean, the things that some young people are saying right now are really, I think, rather disturbing. This is though society is really wants a villain. It really wants a devil, in opposition to what they are. So, what is at the heart of that original sin? And then there's lots of things. In schools, they just a litany of things that we have done terribly. The Chinese head tax and the Komagata Maru, with the Sikhs on board, and the St. Louis in 1939, and on, all these different things. We had slavery, and all these bad things. And number one was how we treat our Indigenous people. We stole their land and just terrible things. And the one that, and then bringing it right into the present, the 60s scoop, which when I was a little bit younger, people would say, a lot of people adopted Indigenous children because these kids didn't have the necessities of life. And I met a number of people. I've met Chrétien, for example, who adopted an Indigenous child. And people are just going, fantastic. And here you go, a few years later, or those people are the most wicked people in the world because they took away their culture. These kids wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the fact that there were non-Indigenous families willing to adopt these kids. So that takes me to the very heart of this trope of residential schools being bad, being wicked. Kids on hooks, kids put into incinerators, girls impregnated by priests. Queen Elizabeth apparently went to the Kamloops Indian Residential School in 1964, and with her husband, Prince Philip, kidnapped 10 children and disappeared them. They were never seen again. There's so many stories about how bad residential schools are. And so imagine if I had said that day that residential schools were good. I wouldn't have dared say that. But I just couldn't accept what they were saying in Kamloops, that those kids were murdered by their teachers. Anyhow, it just seems so preposterous. And 215, and some as young as 3, and never saw a 3-year-old at school. They didn't start to age 7 at the residential school, and most entered a little bit later. So I know that. I can even tell you the name of the only 2 kids that died at the residential school. And I can tell you a lot of the names because this is an area of research for me. And good research. I was studying under Mark Carney, who I'm not keen on, but his father, who was a conservative, very principled man, was the leading expert on Indian residential schools and day schools up until recently when he passed. He was a remarkable man, and he helped me with my life. We were close. And then I went and did a PhD at the University of Toronto. So I do know what I'm talking about. The 2 kids that died at the school, one was, I'm sorry, I just want to apologize to Chris again. he had to listen to me speak yesterday, and now he's, if you want to get up and leave, I understand that. And if you want to throw things at me at any point, like, and I'm a young guy, I'm going to make this interesting for you, I promise. What's your name? Wyatt? Okay. Believe me, some things you're going to find interesting. Just let me get there. And so one of them was a boy named Adrian George, and he was playing a game of sort of cowboy and Indians, and they refer to it as outlaw. But he was, they were pretending to hang somebody, and he was on a box playing with other kids, and somehow he slipped off the box, and the kids couldn't get him off the rope. And then there was a girl named Pearl Joe, and she was down by the river, so you all know Kamloops probably, but there's a fast-moving river right there, right where the residential school was, right on the grounds, right around, and she drowned. Years later, they built a swimming pool, a big swimming pool in front of the residential school, and the motivation for doing so was they didn't want any other kids to drown. They realized that a lot of these kids didn't know how to swim. And so we're to believe that it was all wicked. And all the kids across Canada being told that. And it really, of course, hit its peak hysteria over this Kamloops thing. So when I opened my, big dumb mouth, whatever, and said, well, the only, those who died while enrolled in residential schools did so from disease like tuberculosis and sometimes fires, accidents. Oh my gosh, within 20 minutes, I was walked out. I didn't know, I was asking, why? Two male vice principals are sent up to walk me out. And I packed my stuff up, and I didn't say anything to the students because, I'd like to think it's because it don't involve them, but I think I just didn't, I was just so hurt that I was being treated in this way. And so I walk downstairs and so forth, and I'm starting to get angry. They're not responding to me. They're just walking out of the school. And I get down to the school, and I turn to them, and I said, I'm going to make this easier for you. I'm going to see the principal, and I'm going to ask and find out what I did wrong. And they said, no, you can't do that. And I said, I'm going to make this easier for you. And they recognized that it was a good idea, and not that I wanted to be violent at a school, but my gosh, I knew it was all over for me. And it's over for me. I can never teach kids again. I knew I couldn't be walked out twice and never even would want to be a teacher again. I just couldn't believe this. I couldn't believe that the whole country became so committed to the idea that Christian men and women would go into residential schools to murder children. I just found it extraordinary. And then again, when you research it, and you go, these people did extraordinary things. Oh my gosh, when you driving by the prairies last night, coming an hour late for my speaking engagement, it was so dark in places. How tough it must have been. A friend of mine said to me a while ago, he said that his great-great-grandfather, who settled in Manitoba, lost 2 children to wolves. I mean, when you just think of all the challenges of living in Canada, and men and women of the cloth come, many of them from Britain, and they come here to work with those kids and make this their life mission. And we're defaming the dead in this way. So I would say something I didn't have the guts to say, but I knew it when this happened to me. So I should say 4.5 years ago, to be precise. Residential schools were good. Residential schools, in some cases, were extraordinary. Many of these kids were beautifully served, and they went back to reunions to say that. Kamloops Indian Residential School, that they're presenting as a killing field, had a reunion in 1978, its last year of operation, and about 300 former students and teachers attended. So this is the problem. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is truth, equity is not equity, inclusion is exclusion, diversity is university in the original sense of the word. I mean, everything is the opposite. Everything is the opposite. So when, and again, I'm not going to, I will do a better job. Last night, I didn't know where my mind was. I was just so panicked because I was disappointing people by coming late. But I'd love to bring you and to understand better why you're here, why I matter to you, and why there are people listening to hear. And so, you know, I don't really know. I just want to tell you my story. And I think my story is kind of interesting. And anytime that there's something about anything that you need to say to me or whatever, please do so. But my story is interesting in part because I'm Roy McMurtry's son. Now, most of you would know who Roy McMurtry is, but he was a big deal at one time. He was chair of the CFL Football League, Canada's ambassador, High Commissioner to Britain, Chief Justice of Ontario, Attorney General, Solicitor General. He had all these big roles. And I'm his kid. And I'm being fired. He was still alive. How do you think he handled that? And so I didn't have the guts. And you're going to see how I'll come back about the guts. I actually do have the guts. But it took a while. It took a while for me to understand who I was. And I'm the same person I was in being a little kid, but I didn't know that there was worth to it. I just thought that I was just the guy that was getting in trouble all the time and fired. So for 2 years with my father and my mother, and they both passed around the same time, the first 2 years of this event, I talked to them every day. I talked to them every day for the last 5 years of their lives. Because I love my parents, and I did what I could. I couldn't leave where I am, because I live in the Vancouver area, and I have soon to have 7 grandchildren, and my children. I mean, I couldn't leave and be back there, and my wife is sick. So I'd call for 2 years. They'd ask me, "How was school today, dear?" most of the time, and I'd lie to them. I just didn't want to tell my parents, you know, that this is, you know, what I've done to the family name. So that's why I'm saying, like, I'm in here. It's quite something that people are here. And I felt that last night, and I was pretty bold in Kamloops, and there were over 1 million hits on my name just on Wednesday alone. So people are becoming interested in my story. And it's still hard for me, again, to feel that, because I've gone from really that phoenix, you know, from ashes. I was in a dark place, and as was my wife, understandably. So the conception of the original sin, you have to end the original sin. So Francis Whittleson and Dallas Brody said, "Jim, come with us. Let's just put an end to it." And I said, "I've done everything I possibly can for 4.5 years to try and show people that there are no bodies there." And nobody cared, including nobody cared. I wrote to priests and ministers in Abbotsford, right across Canada. I said, "I'm defending Christians." I wrote, of course, to the Ministry of Education. I wrote to other trustees. I wrote to tons of people, profs across Canada. I didn't get a single response, except for a small group of people in a clandestine organization called Lightfoot. And the interesting thing about them, that we've all managed to create our own little audiences and do something of value. But we were all in a dark place. One of them is named Chanel Fall, who's got a lot of followers in X. She was forced to resign as a teacher, age 30, because she couldn't handle anymore, and she also has a progressive disease. She's in pain all the time. But she's fighting back. But she didn't stay, she didn't fight in the school. She resigned, and then she realized that bad thing. And then there's a woman named Carolyn Burjowski and James Pugh, who started an online news platform called Woke Watch Canada. We were a small group of people. We were all in one chat together on a few occasions. The most memorable one was a guy named Richard Bilkstow, who was defending Canada when he was at, there was, this happens in all the school system. There was a black woman speaking to all the principals in Toronto and saying how terrible and how racist they all were and stuff like that, and how it's even worse in Canada with black racism than the United States. And he put up his hand and he defended Canada, and became part of our group, and shortly after he committed suicide. So it's not easy when you're a principal and you feel, he was a night school principal, had a different relationship with the kids. It's not easy when they take everything away from you. And so that's, I need to make this lighter in some ways, but so we need to address this. We need to say, we have to stop what's happening in schools. Now, I don't know why it is aware of all this here stuff. Do you have land acknowledgements at your school? You're okay. So, okay. My school, we had them every day. Yes. My nephew's in kindergarten last year. Okay. So, look, I'm talking to converted, so we're going to move to questions very soon. But I'm going to say a couple of things. So, this stuff divides families. So, my family, I have 2 girls and a boy. And my girls right now are very upset with me, and they have been for years. I also feel very close to them, one in particular, and the other one, we have good and bad days with each other. But they know I love their children, and I'm always doing things with my grandchildren. So, I have a relationship with them. I think it's a good relationship, but they're very upset with me because they're ambitious, and one wants to hold on to her job, and the other one wants to be a judge. All 3 of my kids happen to go into law, and their partners are all lawyers. So sometimes I'm sitting with the 6 of them right there, and they say, why is it that all the lawyers in BC take a course in which it says that the 215 bodies were found in Kamloops, and they're all children in a mass grave? Why is it that lawyers, young lawyers, still in 2025 are still taking this re-education course? And that's just the beginning of it. It's just, we're stolen land and all that kind of stuff. Why isn't it that lawyers don't fight this? And Chris and I were talking about this in the car up, and yesterday in our presentation, I reduced it to courage and having guts. I'm going to use the word guts today and not courage, just so Chris gets some variety in my talk. But it's absolutely fascinating. And so they'll tell me, and many times, I'm just one-on-one conversation. And my 2 sons-in-law say to me, well, I can't say anything. And I said, well, how did you vote? Because all the lawyers had to vote whether they're going to change that course. And that's how Dallas Brody got kicked out of the Conservative Party in BC. Because she went to the support of the lawyer who actually said, we've got to change our education materials because we're lying to all the young lawyers. That's very sweet of you. Very sweet of you. Thank you. But they said no. And I said to them, well, how did you vote? And they said, I didn't vote. But we had to vote, but we just said, so it was extraordinary. It was about a third of the people that voted for, the third option of not decided or whatever it was. So and they said, well, why didn't you vote? It was anonymous. And they said, no, it's not. No, it's not, because they can figure that out. There's tracks somewhere. They can tell who voted for what, and that could affect my career. And then my daughter-in-law said to me, well, she voted on my side. She's close to me. My son, her husband, is very powerful kind of presence of a person. He's a lot bigger than I am and a lot angrier. I mean, he went through years of university where he couldn't open his mouth because he didn't want to get a bad mark, but he graduated in the end with 3 degrees, and he said that he's going to commit the rest of his life to ending public universities. So that's pretty sad again, that this is what they're running, this is how someone are reacting. I asked my younger daughter, and she said she wasn't going to tell me. And then I asked my older daughter, and she said, it's none of my business, and Dad, I don't agree with anything you're doing. And I don't want to ever talk about this again with you. And I even said to her recently, I said, I'm going to meet the good people of Calgary and Red Deer, and it's really exciting for me, and I'm calling it a book tour. And I only have 6 books. But that's a good thing, again, because it means that they're selling, and I've ordered more. But it's just, I don't care, Dad. I don't care about anything you're doing in that part of your existence. So families are divided. I have 5 siblings. I have 1 sister who's really supportive. And I have 4 who are very unhappy with me because they think they're hurting the family. And then I have some in-laws, 3 in particular, who are very woke, and I know they love me. I really, because I'm a good guy and good with their kids and all that stuff, but they really disapprove of me. So I think you're going to be on my side, though, in a second when I tell you what they're doing in schools, questions. So I'm going to say there's the 6 things that I really started fighting against. 6 things. And I'll go over them really quickly unless you want me to give you anything. The first one is the sex stuff. I waited till Wyatt left the room. And when, there's nobody else that's going to, but I won't go into details. But if you're showing pictures, illustrations to kids as young as kindergarten of sexual acts, there's something wrong there. If you're taking kids at a really young age and you're asking them, they do it in all the schools still in BC. They ask kindergarten kids what their pronouns are and stuff. They want to know their sexuality. And then they're also grooming. You're not supposed to say grooming anymore. In fact, there's all sorts of things that you're not supposed to say anymore in schools because it's all very Orwellian. In 1984, they're getting rid of the old language, and they call it old speak, and they're bringing in new language. And the new language, new speak is reduced. And so there's all these words you can't say, the R word, the N word. But I mean, if you really wrote down all the words, you're getting rid of a lot of the English language. And some things are ridiculous. So if I said Indian, that's enough for me to be suspended as a teacher. But yet Indian is the word that's illegal. It was originally illegal. It's still the official word in the Indian Act and so forth. So anyhow, they just go crazy about all sorts of things. And I didn't want to lose my job, and I knew it was a minefield, but I just wasn't as successful as other people. And eventually, but these are the 6 things I just, I was snitched on by kids, and parents got mad at me, and then the principal went crazy. And it all began one day when I gave a girl Markov, and she's in my book. And and it's kind of an interesting thing. I call her the Tempest because she was a wonderful girl most of the time, and then she had bad days. And she was, I don't know what her condition was, but she just had bad days, and all of a sudden, she loved me as the teacher, and then all of a sudden, she went to the principal and said, I'm a terrible person, and then I was gone. She was the cause of all 3 of my investigations against me, 1 kid. And so be very careful. So the first thing they're doing is they're going into the sex stuff. And if you don't think this is bad, then and of course everyone here is in agreement with me, you really need to see it. So after I was fired, I went into schools to see the drag queen performances because they had drag queens in a ton of schools where I was living in Surrey. I worked in Abbotsford, lived in Surrey. And they ended very quickly because what I did is I walked around the parking lot asking the parents when it was about the time to pick the kids up. And they knew there were drag queens performing. And so things ended very quickly, but I mean, it got crazy. There are drag queens coming into kindergarten classes, bouncing little kids on their laps. This was autoerotic. This was stimulation for them. And we are bringing them into the school to do that with little kids. The next one I'm going to jump to is Indigenous, and I won't say much because I'm going to come back to that in a second, is my 3-year-old grandson. He just turned 3. It was in March. His birthday is February. Went to daycare and came home and asked his mother, he said, am I going to be taken away and have my hair cut off? And my daughter said, well, what are you talking about? And we were talking about residential schools. And he told his mother. And it was the same kid who also came. I said to him, on Easter, I said, what did you learn about Christianity? Well, you don't eat and drink during the day for 30 days, and it's called Ramadan. I mean, it's complete replacement. And you know that. So the next one is race. They're looking at kids and going, you know, the white kids are, in some cases, they brought them up. There are schools where I was working where the white kids had to come to the front of the classroom. And so it's public shaming, but you know that. So I've talked about 3 things so far. I'm going to mention 6. So I started with all the sex stuff, the gender stuff, the trans stuff, and I could go on if somebody wanted more examples. I talked about the Indigenous stuff, land acknowledgement, stolen land. I objected to this stuff. I was objecting to land acknowledgements 4.5 years ago when people thought I was crazy. I ran twice politically for one reason, including with the PPC, because the PPC is the only party in Canada that is reflective of what matters most to me, which is rights and freedoms. But I ran to walk out of the land acknowledgement. So when I did that, and I had it filmed, and I put it on X, and that was years ago. And now it's a big issue because they're taking away people's homes all over British Columbia. And we can come back to that if you're interested. So the next one I want to talk to is all they're moving away from academic standards. They're even having equity marking. Principals are taking teachers aside and saying, I'm not happy with the marks you're giving your Aboriginal kids. And the teacher goes, I didn't even know I had any Indigenous kids in the classroom. You have 2. Well, they're both blonde with blue eyes. No, you know, they get all the rights, all the thing like that, and you need to treat them differently. And then, you know, I make clips with people, or principals, something like that. You know, thank you, but we really need ancestry kits first before we can teach these days. If we're teaching to the group, I need help here. And so this didn't, you know, again, I had superintendents visit me in Surrey long before I went to Abbotsford for my last 2 years, because my wife and I, because of her sickness, we were going to move away from the city so we could knock off our mortgage and, you know, downsize. There's a lot of older people. So when I went to Abbotsford, nobody really knew me, so I was really easy pickings. Because there weren't, you know, if it was at my previous school, I had so many friends there and kids, you know, it never would have happened to me. But, you know, they would have tried nonetheless. In fact, I think some of this woke mafia that exists in all schools, I think if they could, I think they would have hurt me. I mean, if they were good, that we, you know, it's okay to torture people who commit wrong speech. I really think some of these people are so committed to their own moral superiority, because this is all, to me, it's about. It's just about people at the top wanting to pretend that they're better. In Orwell's 1984, you have the 15% of the population that's in the party, you know, with Big Brother and so forth. And they have all the privileges, all the power, and they do really well. And then there's about 85% of the people who don't have any power, and, you know, they do okay, but anyhow, lots of bad things happen to them as well. And then Orwell makes the point, but hope lies with the proles. It's the people at the top aren't going to change it, because the people at the top are happy. That's 15%. It's the same in a school. If you go into a school, there's 15%, or school districts, is probably a better way of explaining it. 15% of the people who are department heads who already have more money and more power, and they're going to use it. They're going to get the better classroom. They're going to rat out a teacher who's not, who's off script. And then the principals and vice principals, and then there's all the people in the board office and stuff. That 15% do not want to lose it. My sister, who's a judge, who's incredibly woke, and she says, I don't care about my 3 white sons. I don't care if they have miserable lives, because we deserve it. Because we've been so privileged as white people, particularly in our family, Jim, that, it's about time other people got the better jobs and so forth. She's part of the 15%. She's never going to lose anything. Even if she were to lose her job, she's got a fat pension already. She gets full pay as a judge, works half-time because she's superannuated. Like, she's fine. It's just so easy for people like Carney to go around and be insensitive to the lives of ordinary people. It would put people to work to put in a pipeline to whatever, but I mean, it's not what he's interested in. Trudeau goes to one residential school, former residential school in Purport, and he went in on a horse to talk to the Chilcot, and he went in on a black horse. I guess he couldn't find a white horse. But he wants this whole display that I am this sort of, Peter on a donkey type thing, or Jesus. And then Trudeau, another time, he had a teddy bear. Maybe this interests our former prime minister. Went to a cemetery, a known Catholic cemetery in Saskatchewan. You know the story. Got down on one knee, put his head down with his teddy bear, and all the kids that were murdered there and stuff, they were Indigenous, and of course there probably wasn't any Indigenous child there, but there could have been. But it's just pantomime, it's theater. The next thing I want to mention, the 5 of 6, and is history. I think history is important because those who control the present can control the past, and those who control the past control the future. I think it's really damn wrong if you change history. And Chris said something to you that he thought was interesting in the car. I asked for feedback. It was a big mistake because Chris said, okay, I have a list here, Jim. And no, Chris was very supportive. He said, I really like the story about your dad. And so here's the story. My father in 1981 was part of the patriating the Constitution. And as you know, there was a problem getting the provinces to agree. In the end, they didn't get all 10 to sign. Quebec didn't. But they got enough for it to pass. And my father broke the impasse because he was personal friends with people of 2 different parties, Roy Roman on the NDP and was Attorney General at the time in Saskatchewan, and Jean Chrétien, who was Attorney General at the time. Attorney General at the time for Canada. And they met, and they had a friendship, and they worked out a deal, and that's down in history. It's known as the Kitchen Accord, and I know it's down in history because it's in some of the textbooks before they removed all textbooks from social studies in schools. But my father's name, and they're talking about the Kitchen Accord, and it's just like one long sentence, and I can't even remember. I think one of them mentioned my dad's name, and there were 2, and the other one just said the Attorney General of Ontario, anyhow. And they said that they, when things weren't looking good for Trudeau and his patriation, that 3 men got together from representing 3 different parties, different parts of Canada as well, representing English and French, and they came together and they over coffee, a lot of coffee, late at night, they came up with this agreement. And I went, what? My dad never drank anything, not even water after 5 o'clock at night. He drank scotch. Do you think my father, who drugged himself every night so he could sleep with sleeping pills and scotch, do you think he would ever drink coffee late at night? So I'd say to my students, no, this is what they do with history. This is what, there was one pope that went around with all the art in the Vatican, knocking off the private parts of the men in the sculptures, but so nobody in history would ever see that again. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing with my father, presenting my father as a coffee drinker. He was not a coffee drinker. And so it just shows you again with the 215 thing, the 215 matters because you can never erase that original sin. I'm going to come back to a second about what's happening in BC and to me personally. But you can't unless you get at the 215. And so that's what I'm doing. But I'm also going after the 6 things I'm telling you. And the last one is the censoring of literature. And they're taking all the books that I loved. And it kept me in school. In many ways, kept me in school. I don't know why, but I was really a lousy student. I was bored. I daydreamed a lot. But you put The Inheritors by William Golding in front of me, or you put Holes, The Outsiders, and can read it again and again, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, they're just, the best of all to me is Kill Mockingbird. You put great literature in front of a lot of kids, and they just, particularly the girls, and all of a sudden, they're just, they found something, and they're growing, and they're learning about other people and other lands, walking in people's footsteps, and, these metaphors, and it's a wonderful thing. They're getting rid of that, and they're bringing in social justice stuff, where the villain's always somebody who is younger, but, has these characteristics, and so you know how that goes. So I'm fighting a lot of different things in the school system. I'm not standing, everybody has abandoned me. Half my family, a lot of my friends, all my colleagues, they're not talking to me because they're afraid. If I meet one in the street, they say nicest things, but they say, I can't be associated with you. Complete abandonment by so many people. But I came to a point in my life where, again, I in those dark moments after being fired, I kind of, I forged in those fires this person. And this person isn't special in any way, except for one thing. I've got guts. So I'm going to come back to that again. I called it courage yesterday. I'm trying to vary it, Chris, for you. And so lots of things are happening, and it's extremely worrisome in schools. And I think the only way it's going to change is if we do something about it. You can't reason with these people because they think they're better than you are, as explained. You have to organize. You have to say to anybody who is saying any of these things that I'm talking about, that any of these things are going well, that you do that. Now, it's hard, and you don't want to lose friendships either. And teachers, there are teachers in the room here, you don't want to, or former teachers, you don't want to get yourself in trouble. I get that. So find ways of not ending up like I ended up. But we need to be bolder as a country. We need complete and utter resistance to this dark, dystopian, communist, destructive ideology. We can call it wokeism, and so that's the gut parts of me. I'm on full throttle, and I'm going to accomplish something. I'm fighting my employer. I'm fighting my regulatory body, I'm fighting my union, I'm fighting the government, I'm fighting all sorts of things. I'm being told all the time I'm going to get lawsuits against me. It hasn't happened. I get death threats. I get all sorts of things. And it doesn't change a thing. Because, and this is a legal thing, Wyatt, if you were in a parents, and I hope this never happens, were in a divorce, and they had to place you with your mother or your father, what would the judge do? What would he do? What would be the most important thing that the judge would do? What was right for you or what was right for your mom or dad? I don't think so legally. What would a judge do? It's in the best interest of the child. The judge would just will say, okay, thank you, I've heard you. Yeah, I understand all these things and like that. It's the child that matters. And that's what schools are set up to, is the child that matters. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm seeing my grandsons being indoctrinated. My grandsons are spending whole days painting these rainbow stripes and the sidewalk and benches and all, at their school. I mean, they're just full on full-on woke indoctrination. So yeah, and maybe the end thing is just to highlight the guts thing. And again, I don't have any more guts than anybody else. It's just that I'm just that Joni Mitchell song. You know, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. I have nothing left to lose. Everything that mattered to me was tied up outside of my family and friends, but it was tied up in my job. I got up in the morning and I came home late. There was never a day I got in my car at 3 o'clock. There was never a teacher who outworked me. I'm sure there are a lot of better teachers out there. There was never a teacher who outworked me. I volunteered for everything. Every single year I taught, I put on special events for disabled kids. Nothing to do with my job. I did theater, I did music stuff, I did environmental stuff, I did coach. 1 year I coached 6 teams in 1 year, 6 high school teams in 1 year. I won provincial championships, city championships, doing all these things. I was a highly committed guy. And thank you. And so anyhow, I think it's a tremendous loss of me because I have a skill set. I'm not good. I can't go out and do a lot of things, but I can go into a classroom and do a good job. So I was with the 1BC people, with Dallas and Francis, and spent a lot of time with them. And on Thursday, they were organized, and I'm closing with this thing here. And then I looked at a couple of questions. On Thursday, I said, where are we meeting? I said, well, we'll tell you tomorrow morning at 10. Dallas, I'm not going to tell anybody. We'll tell you tomorrow morning at 10. It wasn't Dallas. She's not that way. She's just a really sweet woman. She said, I'm not supposed to tell you, but... And then somebody came in right away, and because she's got all these handlers and security people. And then I learned at 10, and I'm driving there, and I get a call from Francis, and she said, where are we going? And I said, well, you know where we're going. You were told the Prestige Inn. And she said, no, that's being changed because we got kicked out. So as soon as 1BC, somebody at the hotel somehow heard that, even though we didn't know until 10, and the meeting was at 11, it was already the hotel said, we don't want you here, and called the police. This is 1BC. This is a party that already has 5% of the electorate supporting it, and I think in time is going to go much higher. I think because it's mainstream values. Like the PPC, I think, I'm certainly hoping that there's going to be growth because I think it really is the mainstream party federally. So we go to another hotel on the other side of Kamloops, and I dressed like this. I didn't have my coat, because we're going to be inside. And they closed the doors to us as well. We were already there, we were already parked, people were inside, and all of a sudden, bang, police called, and Dallas made the decision we're just gonna do it outside, and it was freezing and windy, and I was just wearing these clothes here. Anyhow, we had to. This is a political party. There's 2 elected members of parliament of the Provincial Legislative Assembly, and they're being banned everywhere they go publicly. So what do you think the reception was when these 3 wacko leaders of this anti-woke, anti-indoctrination movement and pro-historical truth and ending Indigenous essentialism or special rights or anything? An Indigenous person, if the person's even Indigenous, has no more rights than anybody else because no child in my classroom has more rights than some other child. It doesn't work that way with me. And it shouldn't work, and it's the same with all parents. All parents love all their kids equally. I know that. Doesn't mean you like all your kids equally or whatever, but you make that effort because that's what you do. Those are the values that we grew up with, and they're not going to be taken away by these reified communists, these thugs, because they hurt people. So we go into TRU, and I think you like this, why maybe find this interesting. So we go in. I'm not an distinguished person at all, and I was fired. So the only reason I'm there is I was the guy who was for years before doing a one-man crusade on, they're lying about residential schools. So they plucked me in. But these 2 people are something else. Frances Whittleson, oh my gosh, it's incredible what she's accomplished. And against such opposition. And Dallas Brody, wow, and talk about death threats that these 2 get. We had 6 security guards. At the protest at one point, someone knocked my sign in the ground, and I went to pick it up, and big guy went and put his foot on it like that, and stepped, and it's my sign, I'd just like to pick it up. And the guy just kept just looking at me and told me to something off, and got my foot on it, so I just pushed him hard. And he fell back, and I picked up my sign, and then he ran right at me. And he was like this far away from me, and out of nowhere, this black shape just goes, one of the 6 security guards. Like, I mean, there's the potential there. You know, the Charlie Kirk moment follows those 2 women in particular. Because I'm particularly Dallas, because she's saying this stuff everywhere. And she's saying, get rid of, change the Constitution, get rid of the, just changing it all. Absolutely not. All Canadians, equal value, that's what 1BC means. All Canadians are the same. Same rights, same consideration, same respect, all this kind of stuff. So what I want to say here with this is they went in there, and there's all these people, and there are many more than the media said. The media said, 150 or something. There's many more than that, because kids went to class or kids came in. So I think there was, 400 or 500 people, because there'd be a group here, and then 20 minutes later, it was the same size group, but all different faces, with the exception of a few hardcore people who wanted to stay all the way through. And so there's lots of people, and Dallas goes out there and starts to speak, and nobody, there's no microphone. There was people crowding around you like that. She's small. Both Frances and Dallas are short and thin, and with not very powerful voices, and drowned out. And then Frances tried to do one-on-one talk and her street epistemology and how she works. She's the intellectual. She wants to work on a person at a time and get them to understand the facts and so forth. None of that was working. So what did I do? I looked at this crowd of a lot of people, and I just walked around, and I walked right up to people, and I went up to them, and I going like this, and I said, why are you lying? If it's a professor, I said, why are you lying to students? I think what you're doing is unconscionable. I couldn't think of anything worse than lying to children. Why are you doing this? Why are you talking about something that you know is not true? You know that those kids weren't harmed. You know there was no murder. And then all of a sudden, all these people gravitating around me and shouting me out and surrounding me, and I just walk somewhere else, and I look back at them or talk to new people. And so that's why there were a lot of hits that day for me, over 1 million hits, because I was completely, and I'm possessed. I was this crazy person, which I maybe kind of are, and I am, but the crazy person that was not going to take no from anybody about anything, and I'm not. I'm going to walk out of any land acknowledgement. I'm going to do anything that goes against my conscience. I'm going to do that for the rest of my life and over my dead body. I said to hundreds and hundreds of people, some really big people, but all sorts of people, groups of people mocking me, people laughing at me, people calling me all sorts of names like that. They got it back. They got it back and more, but they got it back with reason. They got it facts. I stood my ground. I went up to them, I followed them, and I said, show me the evidence. And that one clip that did really well was of a guy saying, why do you need evidence? And that's such a statement about what university is becoming. Why should a university get any funding at all from the public if it's not getting kids to think better? It's getting kids to think like, to me, the most disreputable people in our society. The people who want to destroy it. Chris and I were talking about deconstructionism in the car up here. What is deconstructionism? Jim, what's your take on it? And I said, here's my best attempt at it. Chris, you're smarter than I am, but I'll give it a try. It's taking apart. It's saying everything that our ancestors built, including residential schools or any schools, everything that we're part of, even our language, everything about us, our religion, even the incredible accomplishments of the explorers and so forth. They're in somebody else's land, and we're still on their land. Everything about us is being deconstructed. But, so that's it. That's who I am. I'm just the teacher who was fired. Lots of people get fired. There's something interesting about that. Except that I'm fighting back. And I'm doing it I know with some people in this room, because I have a sense there's probably some people in this room who follow me or have, in some way or another, people may be watching here, but there might be some people who have supported me in one way or the other already. I think that's what we need right now. I don't think we need to convince the other side, because first of all, you can't convince people who are deluded and who are fanatical and are doing it for their same interests. They're the 15%, or people who want to be the 15%. They want to be better than you, and they want to take everything for you, including your land. And if you don't think that's serious, then come live where I live. Half of Tsawwassen is already owned by the local band. It's 400 people that own half of the town of Tsawwassen, which is where you get the ferries going to the island. And they want it all now. And the people in government, EB, the premier, and the prime minister, they're all happy to give it away. And the people in Richmond, and I'm part of that as well, and it's amazing talking to people there, and to hear them, and to talk to these people, and to watch them crying and saying, I went to the bank, and the bank's refusing to renew my mortgage. But when you hear people say that to you, and it's older people, like it's older people that are gonna fight, hope lies with the 85%. It's not going to be the people who are benefiting. The people are fine. My sister's not going to worry if her land's taken away, her house is taken away. She'll buy another one somewhere else, and oh, look, you know, it's so good. Look at me. I've always defended Indigenous people. It's us. Hope lies with us. And we need guts. We need courage. The courage of our convictions. Does anybody have any question?
Thank you, Jim. And just before we go to questions, I've got a mic here. And what we're going to do for our Q&A, I just brought your book up just so you can
thank you.
just show those online and where to go ahead.
Oh,
look. You know,
well, that's very nice of you. It's a really well written. No, it's my story, and people have offered me money in the last almost 5 years, and I've never taken a dime. And Chris knows I'm real about that, because Chris said he was going to pay for my hotel, and I told him in the car that I was going to pay for my hotel. I'm happy to be with you guys. This means something to me. It means that, you know, I've risen. I mean, I'm not ashes anymore. So my story is interesting because you see all the things that they did to me, and I don't think this should happen to any other teacher or employee. And so there's a few copies here that Chris probably has. And if kindly, I'm selling them for $20, or if Chris could give, there's a little bookmark that has the information. They can get it on Amazon, or you can just go to my website, or jimmcmurtry.com. But that helps me, because selling the number of books that I've sold already helps my legitimacy. It helps scare my employer, my regulatory body, and my union. And the fun thing is, my union is the BCTF, the most woke, communistic, anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-everything union out there, I think. And they haven't abandoned me yet, because they're scared of me, because they don't want to be sued. And when people support me by buying my book or reading my articles or following me on X, it makes me stronger, and it makes them weaker. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. So we're going to have those books at the back, and the bookmarks that he mentioned as well. So just an outline for their Q&A. Yes, you're going to be online. Don't feel nervous about it. You don't have to give your name, but I will come to you. If you just put your hand up, I will come to you. You're not going to be videotaped, but just to let you know, there's about 300 watching, and they would probably love this opportunity to ask you questions. And I have some myself. So if you just would raise your hand, and I will come to you. And just before that, I want to just give you a little personal experience. Like I said, I'm from this area, and we just had our county councillors voted in. And we happened to have 4 in my division, so I hosted a forum. And I waited out of, questions, and I presented time for individuals to ask questions as well. And my final question I brought to our candidates was UNDRIP. What is their understanding of UNDRIP and what's their position? And I know that you're going to probably talk about this, but I just want to tell you what happened. There was some discussion, and that Tuesday, it was election day, and I went to cast my vote, and lo and behold, one of the constituents recognized me and came over and talked to me, and she said, "Bev, I'm so glad you asked that last question." She says, "I'm Native. Our band has a good chief, and I am so glad that discussion came up." So, you know, when we discuss this with the Natives, that's what they like to be called, Natives. I learned this, and I have had experiences where Natives have told me their experience in these schools that their chiefs encouraged to have started. Some of the chiefs encouraged this, and they said if it wasn't for these residential schools, they would not have been educated. And this was a lawyer, a Native lawyer that I was actually speaking with at the time. So, and they do also risk coming out and speaking good of their past because it doesn't fit the narrative. So God help us just to be real. Help us to be bold. Help us to be truthful. So in that, I'm just going to go, I saw a hand, so I'm just going to go and get the question.
My question / comment relates to what Bev was talking about here. The dialogue, the discussion is so important. Is there a place online where people can see concise, frequently asked questions and answers that have resources to back them up? Because we know the what now. We just need to work on the how and have concise action plan for that.
Well, it's wonderful, and that's consistent with what I was saying, that I think we all know right now that there's an awful lot wrong with schools and our society, and we need to take action. Just one thing that Bev might find interesting was you mentioned UNDRIP. UNDRIP came in, I think it was 2 months after the 215. So without the 215, that falsehood, I don't think UNDRIP would have passed. And DRIPA wouldn't have passed in British Columbia. And both UNDRIP and DRIPA means really, and of course the Richmond Coalition decision, is that Indigenous title to all of Canada is senior to your title to your property. And so if that's the Canada people want, that's fine. Again, it's over my dead body, because I spent my life working with kids from other countries. When you're in a city like Surrey, the vast majority of the kids are immigrant. I mean, it's amazing, are from immigrant families. And I worked hard to make sure that they had the same rights, and freedoms and privileges or whatever as anybody else. So this idea that all of a sudden I'm going to stand by and lose it. So you asked, it's a big question as to, you know, what to do to find that. And maybe we could talk personally afterwards, because I've got some suggestions. My particular focus at this time is my story. I think it's also because of all that happened in Kamloops. It's the 215 thing. And there are, I talk about that in my book quite a bit. I talk about the different organizations. I have reviews from Conrad Black and former judges and other people. So I try and address action plans. But right now all I would like to say is, and Bev repeated it, we need to be bolder.
When it comes to being bold, if you are, like, do you have one piece of information you'd give people if you're part of an organization that does land acknowledgements in order to make a case for not doing land acknowledgements anymore? Yeah,
and I, I've been talking about this for the one person who's most critical about me and walking out on land acknowledgements, publicly filming it and then putting it online, and to do it again during the provincial and federal elections, I got a lot of angry people with me. And it's a man who's a quadriplegic. He was the mayor of Vancouver, Sam Sullivan. I don't know if anyone knows who he is. But he's somebody who believes in preserving history, and we become friends. And he said, Jim, we shouldn't do land acknowledgements because they're repetitive, because they're false, because they're compelled speech, and on and on and on. But you don't want to be rude. Wouldn't it be better if you got up beside the person or asked if you could do your own land acknowledgement and say something different and have equal space? And I said, Sam, that doesn't work. At school, no kid's going to speak out or teacher because you're going to get in trouble. Because it comes down. This is an order. One of the things that I mentioned is there's 8 professional standards for teachers in British Columbia. There was 8, and 2 years ago they brought in a 9th. And it's all about how you have to respect and commit yourself as a teacher to the healing of Indigenous people. Healing. Teachers now have to be therapists, shrinks. And then it said, your person, it's clear as, written out, you're not allowed personal opinions on anything to do with Indigenous people. This is our positions, including in residential schools. And then they list where you cannot have your own personal opinion. And it includes the staff room. Staff room is the only place left in a high school where you dare open your mouth, because you look around and you go to the thought police. No, Bill's okay. Kareen's okay. Okay, hey, what do you think about it? Anyhow, but you can't even do that now. And now that it's law and policy and so forth. So I don't have a good answer for you now, outside of the fact that you need to resist. And whether that is just quietly writing to the principal or whatever, I'm not principal in your case, but write to the organization or talk to somebody else, someone hiring you quietly, or get other people, talk to other people about it and say, maybe there's a group we could approach and so forth. It's not for everybody. Some environments it's too dangerous, and some people don't have the character type. So I'm actually not needing people to go out and take risks. I'm asking people just to support those who are already out there doing that. And people here are doing that. You came out today. You're supporting me. You're making me feel bigger as a person. And so I'm sorry that's not the best answer, but.
Any other questions?
Hi. Not, I guess a question and a statement. As you listen to all this, and I follow you, Jim, and you're an inspiration. But one thing is I'm reminded of a quote, I'll probably ruin the last name, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. They lie to us. We know they lie to us. They know that we know they lie, and we know that they know that we know, and yet they still lie. And that's where we are today, this narrative. But my question would be regarding Bill C-254, which I think not enough people are aware of, that it's going to criminalize what you talk about. And I've written our government, the Premier and my MLA and the Indian minister here, because you've been so terrific about putting together a list of those children that are supposed to be buried, that are buried elsewhere and died of something else. That's going to be a crime, and it's going to be a federal crime under Bill C-254, reintroduced. So everything you're doing and talking about here will be criminalized. And because it's a federal law, I think the provinces are going to need to do something, whether it's notwithstanding or something, to defend my right to even write the government about this. And I used your data. So I just wanted you to maybe add some color to that, to Bill C-254.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for writing. I mean, you're taking action. We have to do that. Whatever that is, whatever we can do, we need to do that. When you talk about lies in the Soviet Union and the show trials, and it's still there in Russia today, you can't form a generation of children, fill their heads with lies, and think it's not going to affect generations afterwards. There's so many people that tune in today well, they say things that are just incredible. I go, why would you ever think that? Oh, but such as the graves thing. I say to kids, well, this is why I got fired, it's about the graves things. And they said, yeah, and what about it? Well, there weren't graves. Really? I mean, it's common. It's just so much of that. So the just ending my remark and response, but thank you ever so much, man, is Francis Whittleson, just talking about the boldness. So we meet at the Home Hardware, I think it was Home Hardware. We meet up there a mile away. We were supposed to meet somewhere else, but protesters were going to be there. They were worried. They changed the Home Hardware. We were outside for an hour and a half, just freezing. And then we walk it seemed like a kilometer anyway, right to where we're going to go, right into this one place, Student Street, the heart of TRU. Frances is in the lead. Dallas is right beside her. I'm behind them. I want these two. They're the more public people. They said, "Don't be with us, Jim." And I said, "But yeah, I like to walk a little behind." And we get up to there, and I said, because it's my nature, I said, let's go inside. And they said, no, we're just going to be outside. And I said, we should go inside. And the other two said, sure. So we started going toward the door. And again, we had a lot of people, including some security guys, as I said, Andrea Humphrey and some other people with relatives with their cameras. And Frances, again, is, she's small. And she's coming in, she's wearing this billboard, like Billboard Chris. And they only send out one person. There was almost no Indigenous people there because the university very clearly asked them not to come because they didn't want what happened in Winnipeg. They thought the best thing to do was make it a non-event, have nobody notice us. So they asked. So there was almost no Indigenous. I didn't see a single Indigenous person except for possibly 2 older people. But a lot of orange shirts. The people came up, but they were told not to. They just wanted it to be a complete non-event, no one show up. So Frances, open the door, Frances starts to walk in. And right away, a guy walks out, an administrator, and he said, "That's who I am right now." And he said, "I'm asking you to leave. You cannot come inside, and you can't be here. I'm asking you to leave. This is private property." And Frances looks at him, and she says, "I'm not going to leave." And then he pulls out a piece of paper, and he said, "Well, you've come here before, and we served you with these trespassing papers. And so second time, what's going to happen to you, which is the police are going to be called." And Frances already told me that she was prepared to be arrested. And she said, "Jim, are you prepared to be arrested?" And I said, I'd like not to be. It'd be better if I weren't. But if you're being arrested, I don't want to miss out. And he said to her again, "Frances, I'm asking you to leave." And she said once again, "I'm not leaving." Then he said, "I'm asking you right now to move away a little bit because you're blocking the entrance." She said, "I'll do that." And she moved about 15 feet, and then the crowd away from the door and the main student area. And he said, "Thank you, but I'd like you further away." And Frances said, I'm good here." They didn't call the police because that's not what TRU wanted. That would have attracted a bigger crowd. But she stood her ground. We all stood our ground. And again, what you were saying about all the lies, people went along with it. Everybody, the whole society went along with all the lies that they also had Chris and I were talking about the Cultural Revolution. I don't know we got into that. But from 1966 to 1976 in China, they completely turned the society around. They killed all as you told me, the 4 olds, the traditions and all the old things, all the old values like we're doing here. Get rid of, Western values, Enlightenment values, Christian values, just sweep it all, literary values, get academic values, just get rid of it all, anything to do with Europeans. And so it's absolutely fascinating how people can become so easily herd-like, and it's hard to break. And in 1984, the protagonist, Winston Smith, in the end, he's broken. He's broken. And maybe that's the message more, is it's not that we're all going to be broken. We're not. You watch. I'm telling you, all schools are going to change in a very fundamental way. But it's we've got a fight on our hands.
We've got room for time for another question. Yeah, one last question here.
Yeah, I believe you knew Mark Carney's father personally. Was that true? A lot of us know that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, is, I believe, an evil man who's very deluded. But how do you think he got to that stage? I think that's probably a parallel for a lot of the professors and educated people who are now educating the kids. Mark Carney's father, I believe, was a head of the school in Fort Smith. And, coming from a conservative point where his father was at, how do we get the next generation to this deluded point? Was it the universities, and how do you see that progression?
Yeah, I think Mark Carney's success is he became part of the 15%, then part of the 1%, and then, part of the international elite. I think it'd be hard to have much of a conversation with Mark Carney about Canada, because I don't think he knows Canada. He certainly doesn't know ordinary Canadians. And he did something to me which is a cardinal sin. He was only responded once about the residential school thing, about Indigenous people. And they wanted to hit him on the fact that his father never said anything bad about residential schools. Never. And that's why this idea that they're bad, I never heard it until, 6, 7, 8 years ago. All of a sudden, the zeitgeist comes in. All of a sudden, people are saying things that, as I said at the beginning, complete opposite from the truth. Mark Carney's father was a gentleman above everything else. He was so wonderful with the students. He was somebody who saw himself as a man of the people. And I'm sure was a lovely father for Mark. So during the campaign, maybe you know this, there was just one time that Mark was asked and responded to it. And he turned around. Can anyone tell me who it was? I loved my father, but those are not my views. Now, I loved my father, and I didn't agree with every view of my father. That's normal. Do you think I'm going to tell other people that? Absolutely not. I mean, there's something wrong there. There's something wrong with so many of our leaders. So again, hope lies with the proles, with us. And I think we're going to succeed. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Jim. And yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Standing ovation here for Jim, and I'm sure online.
Thank you so much.
And I just want to close with the declaration, I love my father, because he is the one that's given us this land. He's the creator of heaven and earth, and he has a way for us to work this through, and it's shoulder to shoulder, Jim, shoulder to shoulder.
That's beautiful.
Amen. So thank you for the 300 online, and thank you for coming out today. There's about 25 of us here at the hall in Central Alberta, so thank you again.
Thank you. It means an awful lot to me, and I will probably remember this for the rest of my life, so thank you. And I'm around for a little while longer, if there's anybody, if I can be of any assistance. And if you ever contact me online or through X or whatever, I make a point of responding to everybody.
We have the hall till 12, so feel free to come in and